Hello, guys, this is your friend, and we are back with a new fanic. And if you enjoy this fanic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanic like this. And now let's start the fanic.
Naruto sighed as he struggled to support Tsunade's weight, who was currently drunk beyond belief and passed out. The 16-year-old blonde had randomly stumbled upon Tsunade causing a ruckus at a local bar. She was complaining when the bartender refused to give her more alcohol and asked her to leave. Naruto had arrived just in time to prevent an accident that would have made the Godime Hokage of Konoha look bad and possibly cause a scandal. Fortunately, before Tsunade could start a fight, she had promptly passed out, and here he was carrying the busty Senju back to her home at the Hokage Tower. Damn old woman. She's got to learn to stop drinking so much, Naruto thought with a grunt as he adjusted his grip on Tsunade's waist. Tsunade's head was currently leaning on his shoulder, and Naruto shivered when he felt her drool trail down his neck. Seriously, the one time he decided to wear a normal shirt instead of his trademark jumpsuit, Tsunade was drooling on his neck. This was the last time he decided to add a little variety in his fashion sense. Drink more sake, Tsunade muttered as she buried her head in his neck. Naruto chuckled despite the situation. Even when you're dreaming, all you can think about is sake. Why am I not surprised? He asked, but received no reply. The familiar sight of the Hokage Tower got closer with every step, and Naruto sighed in relief when he reached the door. He used his free hand that wasn't supporting Tsunade to try and open the door. He growled when he realized it was locked. The key should be on her. Naruto searched her pants pocket, but no luck. Where else could it be? He thought. His eyes landed on her bountiful cleavage and a light bulb went off in his head. Hey, don't girls keep stuff in there? Maybe I should. No, she would kill me if she found out. But, he glanced at her closed eyes. She's passed out. It'll be quick. Naruto moved his hand above her cleavage, stopping when it was just a few centimeters away. He cast one more glance at her sleeping face and gently reached in. As soon as he placed his hand inside her robe, it was immediately enveloped by the soft mass of her big globes of flesh. The warmth and softness that greeted him surprised him greatly, and he couldn't stop his hand from giving her an experimental squeeze. He almost pulled out when he heard Tsunade moan and stir a little. Oh. She shifted a little more before returning to her still posture. He sighed in relief and slowly searched the area around her large S. After several minutes of searching, it was a large area. Naruto's hand closed around something metallic and he reluctantly retreated his hand from between her two soft pillows. Huh, I guess it is true, he thought as he identified the metal object as a key. He unlocked the door and quietly pulled it open. Tightening his grip around Tsunade's waist, Naruto entered the large building and closed the door behind him. He moved through the darkened house with caution, carefully keeping his free hand out in front of him to prevent himself from colliding with an unseen object. After a little while, he finally found the door that led to Tsunade's room. Upon entering the room, Naruto's eyes widened when he realized just how big it was. The room was easily the size of his entire apartment, with still some room to spare. A very large bed dominated the middle of the room, complete with at least a dozen pillows and blue sheets. A large, full-length mirror was situated next to the bed, and several cabinets lined most of the free space along the walls. All in all, it was a room fit for a king, or a Hokage, as the case was. Naruto moved toward the side of the bed and gently laid down a dead-drunk Tsunade on its sheets. His shoulders immediately felt relief when the extra weight left. Damn, she was heavier than I thought. That's probably because of her. His thoughts trailed off when his gaze landed on her now uncovered S. They must have spilled out when I lowered her on the bed. His eyes roamed the milky white orbs of flesh hungrily, and he felt his erection strain against the fabric of his boxers and pants. He literally began to drool when he caught sight of her huge tits. They were a pink color, with the areola a light brown. Every time Tsunade took a breath, her magnificently wonderful bust moved and slightly jiggled up and down. Suddenly, an idea formed in his head and a perverted grin spread across his face. Well, she is heavily drunk and passed out. There's no way she could wake up. And she'll never know. His conscience was telling him how wrong it would be to take advantage of her in this state, but another head kept saying, she won't know. Besides, she owes you. You saved her from making a fool out of herself and carried her home. It's only fair you get something in return. There was still some doubt, and look at those wonderful tits, that sealed it. All doubt was gone. Naruto climbed onto the bed and straddled Tsunade's waist. He checked one last time to make sure she was still passed out, and then grabbed a handful of her ass with both hands. They were so soft, his hands literally sank into them. He groped and massaged them with eager hands, marveling at the sheer size of her ass. They were humongous, easily twice the size of his head. His hands moved to her giant, erect nipples and began to tease and squeeze them. He heard Tsunade moan a little, but barely paid attention. Feeling rather daring and unable to resist any longer, Naruto's mouth latched onto one of her nipples and began to on them. He ravished them with the intensity of a newborn baby seeking milk from its mother. While he ate on her fantastic tits, Naruto's hand groped the rest of her body. His hands reached her pants and, growling against her ass, pulled them down with great speed and strength. Like how she didn't wear a bra, it appeared she didn't wear panties either. His hand glided over her entrance and his eyes widened when he felt her juices. She's enjoying this. She's asleep and she's enjoying this. His raging erection started to hurt being constrained by his pants, so he briefly stopped his ministrations and pulled them down, along with his boxers. His rock hard sprung free from its confines, causing all 9 inches of his meat to smack against her toned stomach and rest below her ass. His was already leaking pre-cum like crazy, lathering her stomach in its stickiness. I've always dreamed of doing this, he thought happily as he scooted up a little and placed his in between her ass. He placed his hands on each and smashed them together, completely enveloping his. He threw his head back and groaned. It feels so good. I'm already about to cum. After pausing for one moment to relish the heavenly feeling, Naruto began to thrust inside the valley of her ass. His pre-cum quickly coated the space between her ass, making it much easier to thrust his throbbing erection and emitting an arousing smacking sound every time he thrust. Occasionally, the tip of his would emerge from Tsunade's globes and jab her cheek, covering it with pre-cum. Naruto desperately wanted to turn her head and shove the tip of his in her mouth, but a stirring in his huge balls caused him to have other ideas. He pulled out his from between her ass and began to furiously jerk it off. He aimed his right at her fleshy orbs. Quote exclamation mark. Here it comes, Tsunade. He yelled. A few seconds later, a huge blast of pure, white cum splashed against Tsunade's ass, completely bathing them in its stickiness. Rope after rope of thick cum continued to spray her ass for a full minute until his orgasm finally subsided. Once the last of his cum left his, Naruto almost collapsed from the sheer size of his orgasm. He stared at her cum-covered ass in awe. That was the biggest orgasm I've ever had. Look at all that cum. He glanced at Tsunade's face and was amazed that she was still passed out, even with a gallon of cum on her chest. Despite the hardcore orgasm he just experienced, Naruto's was still erect and ready for more, but he wanted to do something first. Naruto traced his index finger along one of her cum-caked ass and gathered a little bit on the tip of his finger. Once satisfied he had enough, Naruto moved his finger from her to her open, drooling mouth. He placed the finger in her mouth and slathered the cum over her tongue. To his surprise, Tsunade began to on his finger with great enthusiasm and rolling her tongue of the small appendage. Love the taste, she slurred out sleepily as she continued to on his finger. She was still completely dead drunk, yet still receptive to feelings and sensations. Naruto withdrew his finger from her mouth and gathered more cum. This time, he collected a copious amount of cum, using his whole hand. For the next few minutes, he repeated the same actions. He would gather a large amount of cum, place each finger in her mouth, and withdraw when she had ate off every drop of his spunk. Even after all this, Tsunade had barely made a dent in the amount covering her s. Naruto eyed the ungodly amount of cum with a frown. I'll have to clean that up soon. His eyes moved to one of her hands and he had the sudden urge to feel it wrapped around his. He grabbed her hand, and was about to wrap it around his, but suddenly got hit with another brilliant idea. He let go of her hand and made his signature hand sign. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, he yelled, and 3 clouds of smoke filled the room. Once the smoke cleared, 3 exact copies of Naruto were there, equally as. They eyed Tsunade's body with lust and their s immediately grew erect. Alright, you guys, I call her first. Other than that, you can go wild. The clones nodded and eagerly moved toward her body. One clone sat down on her torso and smacked his between her s, not in the least caring about the fact that they were covered in cum. He smashed her big globes together and started to thrust between them. Another clone squatted above Tsunade's head and pushed his rod into her open mouth. Like she did with Naruto's fingers, Tsunade unconsciously began to unlick the large appendage. The clone groaned and grabbed her head, throating her. The last clone grabbed one of her hands and wrapped it around his. He moved her arms side to side to create a jerking effect. The original Naruto moved between Tsunade's legs and placed his head at her entrance. With one single movement, Naruto thrust all 9 inches of his into the busty Senju's glistening. He moaned in absolute bliss when he felt his head kiss her womb. It was the most pleasurable sensation he had ever felt and he stayed still to savor the superb feeling. At the exact same time he penetrated her, Tsunade moaned around the clones, bringing the clone over the edge. Quote exclamation mark. It's so amazing. I'm coming. He shoved his entire length down her throat and emptied his ball sack in her stomach. He watched in amazement as a passed-out Tsunade gulped down every single drop of his cum. He continued to thrust inside her mouth until she had drunk every drop, then pulled out. He popped out of existence with a satisfied smile on his face. The other clone, who was using Tsunade's hand to jerk himself off, immediately took the other clone's spot and shoved his down her throat. Once again, Tsunade ate and licked at the juicy meat stick. The clone shivered in pleasure as Tsunade's mouth vibrated around his. The original Naruto was thrusting into the legendary Urs with great speed, and Tsunade was clearly enjoying it, despite being unconscious. The clone thrusting between Tsunade's big globes of flesh felt his balls stir and removed his from them. He moved to the position where the other clone was thrusting into Tsunade's throat. Make some room, he said as he positioned his near her mouth. The other clone caught onto the idea and briefly stopped thrusting, allowing his brother clone to also place his in her mouth. The Senju's mouth was stretched completely with 2 big, thick s thrusting in it, but she still ate them with equally fervor. Finally, both clones had reached their limits, and simultaneously exploded their loads inside her throat. Even with the ungodly amounts of cum being shot down her throat, the Godaime Hokage drank every drop, filling her stomach with at least a gallon of hot, thick cum. After emptying their loads, the 2 clones disappeared in twin clouds of smoke, wearing satisfied smiles reminiscent of the first. Once the last 2 clones disappeared, Naruto, still thrusting inside of her, wrapped his arms around Tsunade's waist and buried his face in her cum-covered s. He didn't care. Tsunade's felt so divine and her s so soft. His mind was overloaded with pleasure. He grabbed a full of her s and ate on one of her nipples, not caring about the taste of his cum on them. He could hear Tsunade's heavy breathing and moaning, and he felt prideful that, even though she was unconscious, he was still giving her great pleasure. Ah! Oh! Tsunade mumbled out and Naruto felt her inner walls tighten around his rod. To Naruto's great and utter shock, the Senju beauty had just had an orgasm, and all because of him. Her juices bathed his and mixed with his pre-cum, making it slicker and easier to thrust in. His pelvis began to move at blinding speeds, pounding inside her with all the strength he could muster. A familiar stir in his balls foretold his impending orgasm. Feeling he was about to erupt, Naruto shoved every inch inside of her, causing the tip of his to enter her womb. Ah, Tsunade. I'm about to come. Naruto's eyes rolled back into his skull as his orgasm hit full force. Cup-sized blasts of cum splashed against the inside of Tsunade's womb, causing her to have another orgasm. Naruto continued to cum endlessly inside of her for at least 5 minutes until his orgasm subsided. He stood still for at least 10 minutes with his head buried in her ass and his still inside her. He enjoyed just laying there, snuggling into her bosom and holding her close. Finally, he reluctantly pulled out of her. The moment he did, massive amounts of cum mixed with her juices flowed out of her and formed a large puddle on the sheets. Removing his head from her pillow's soft globes, Naruto immediately began to feel guilty from what he did. He quietly put his clothes back on and cleaned the mess on the bed sheets. Once finished with that, Naruto cleaned off the copious amount of cum on the blonde goddess's ass. He dressed her and placed her sleeping form underneath the sheets. He stared at her beautiful face as she slept peacefully. Feeling a desperate need to do so, Naruto bent his head down and placed a gentle kiss on her supple lips. I'm sorry, Tsunade. I love you. It was the first time he had ever said such a thing, but he was sincere nonetheless. He cast one last glance at her sleeping form and left the room, closing the door behind him. The moment the door closed, Tsunade opened her eyes and a large grin spread across her face. That brat, he really thought I was passed out. He's lucky I like him so much or he would be dead right now. She shifted in her bed and shivered when she remembered the feeling of him inside her. We'll have to have a repeat performance. Only next time. I won't pretend to be passed out. Did he really mean that last part? She pondered on that question for some time before finally going to sleep. One thing was for sure. The next time she saw the blonde shinobi, she would give him an experience he would never forget. Naruto yawned and rubbed his tired eyes as he waited for his bowl of ramen at Ichiraku's. He had barely gotten any sleep last night, partially due to the immense guilt he was feeling for taking advantage of Tsunade. He tossed and turned the whole night, desperately trying to get some sleep, but his conscience wouldn't let him. He felt horrible for doing such a thing, but he couldn't resist. Despite her age, Tsunade was insanely wise, and his libido wouldn't let him pass up the opportunity to ravage the busty blonde. His still throbbed every time he thought of her wonderful, voluptuous body. It ached to once again enjoy her moist folds and her large, soft globes, and it had only been 12 hours. Naruto didn't think he could ever look at Tsunade again without jumping her. He sighed in annoyance when he felt his swell to full size. This was going to be a long day. Are you okay, Naruto-kun? Naruto raised his head up and saw Ayame staring at him with a worried expression. You look very tired. Is everything alright? Naruto smiled at her. She was always worrying about him. Yeah, everything's fine. Just didn't sleep well. His whole mind stopped as his eyes fully registered her appearance. Ayame wore her traditional cooking outfit like always, but something inside him made him take a closer look. He had never taken the time to truly admire her figure. Her face was beautifully heart-shaped, framed by bangs of light brown hair. Her eyes were a pretty shade of brown and she had a cute little nose. Her lips were pink and supple, and Naruto thought they would be wonderful to kiss. Moving further down, Naruto noticed two bumps that were constrained against her shirt. She had nice bust that complemented her slender frame perfectly. Below them, he could see her hips flare out from her torso. It was difficult to tell with her apron and pants on, but Naruto could see a pair of nicely shaped legs. She wasn't stacked like Tsunade, but Ayame was still very beautiful and possessed lovely curves. How could he have not noticed this before? Was he really that oblivious? Naruto-kun. Ayame's sweet voice broke through his thoughts. She had a light blush on her face and she seemed to be avoiding his gaze. You were staring, Naruto-kun. Naruto blushed beet red. I'm sorry, Ayame-chan. I was just, he felt embarrassed being caught staring. Ayame was like an older sister to him. He shouldn't be looking at her like that. Ayame giggled at his stammering and he felt mortified. She decided to save him from further embarrassment. It's okay, Naruto-kun. It's nice to know you see me as a woman. She leaned over the counter until her face was close to his. Naruto's blush increased at their close proximity and Ayame smiled at the effect she was having on him. Can I tell you a secret, Naruto-kun? She asked in a seductive tone. Naruto felt his heartbeat increase. He didn't trust his voice, so he simply nodded. Ayame leaned closer and whispered in his ear, I sometimes can't help but stare at you. You've grown into quite the handsome young man, Naruto-kun. Her tongue gently licked his earlobe and he shivered at the sensual act. She pulled back and looked him in the eyes with a wise smile on her face. Why don't you come back here and I'll make you forget about whatever's bothering you? Naruto-kun. The way she said his voice caused his to grow fully erect and it strained against his jumpsuit. But, your dad. He took the rest of the day off and left. We have the stand all to ourselves. Now, she took her apron off and cupped her cloth-covered S. She looked at him with lust burning in her brown eyes. What do you say? All doubts were gone. Naruto literally hopped over the counter and pressed his body against hers. Ayame moaned as he grinded his throbbing member against her and she quickly closed the curtain above the counter to give them some privacy. She pressed her lips to his and he eagerly responded. Their tongues battled for dominance while both their hands wandered each other's body. Ayame ran her hands through Naruto's blonde hair and lightly massaged his scalp. Naruto's hands groped Ayame's, which proved to be quite big and plump, much to his pleasure. He squeezed each cheek with great enthusiasm, marveling at its soft, yet firm, shape. Ayame felt immense pride that he really enjoyed her and moaned at the feeling of him touching her. Also, she was very excited about the large bulge pressing against her torso. Removing one hand from his hair, Ayame s her hand down to Naruto's jumpsuit's zipper and pulled it down. Immediately, Naruto's boxer-covered erection sprung free from its confines and Ayame gasped at the sight of the large appendage. Naruto seized the opportunity and shoved his tongue in her mouth, exploring her oral orifice. Ayame let him enjoy his spoils of war. She grasped his cloth-covered and heard Naruto moan against her mouth. She could feel it throbbing in her hand, begging for release. Reluctantly, she pulled away from the kiss. Naruto looked at her with a confused expression, but caught on when she lowered herself onto her knees. Take off your jumpsuit, Ayame said, and Naruto quickly complied. After taking off his jumpsuit, Naruto was left only in his black undershirt and boxers. Ayame smiled at him and gripped the top of his boxers. She pulled down and stared in amazement at the large piece of meat just several centimeters from her face. To put it simply, Naruto's was huge and leaking large amounts of pre-cum. She doubted she could take all of it in her mouth, but she really wanted to taste such a delicious looking. She licked the tip of his member and relished in the taste of his pre-cum. Ah, that feels so good, Ayame-chan. Naruto struggled to keep his hips from bucking into her mouth. Ayame continued to lick only the head, deliberately teasing him and enjoying the taste of his pre-cum. After a few minutes of agonizing teasing, Ayame stopped licking and engulfed his thick, bulbous head into her mouth. Naruto threw his head back at the pleasurable sensation and fought not to come there and then. Ayame ed on the head of his and slowly started to rub the length of his erect shaft with her hand. With her other hand, Ayame caressed his big balls. She bounced them up and down in her hands as she ed and rubbed his rock hard. Her arousing ministrations caused a large spurt of pre-cum to shoot out of Naruto's and into her mouth. Ayame moaned at the delicious taste of his pre-cum, sending vibrations over his head. Naruto groaned at the amazing feeling and ran his hands through her long, brown hair. It felt so good that Naruto didn't think he could last much longer. Ayame-chan, more, please, he asked, and she was happy to comply. She took in 4 more inches of his thick rod, causing her mouth to stretch considerably. Her tongue slid underneath his shaft and she felt another blob of pre-cum blast into her mouth. She could feel his erection throb furiously and she knew he wouldn't last much longer. She pulled back until only the head was in her mouth and ed on it while both her hands jerked his shaft off at a blinding speed. The saliva covering his shaft made it easier to move her hands up and down. Naruto bucked his hips into her mouth involuntarily. He couldn't hold it any longer. He was going to come. Ayame-chan, I'm gonna. That was all he could say before he exploded inside of her mouth. Ayame struggled to swallow the thick, creamy liquid as it came out in cup-size blasts. Some spilled out of the corners of her mouth as more continued to shoot out. How could he possibly cum this much? Ayame thought as she swallowed mouthfuls of his cum. Finally, the last drops of cum drizzled into her mouth and Naruto's legs felt like jelly due to the sheer power of his orgasm. Once he stopped coming, Ayame slowly pulled the still throbbing out of her mouth, making sure to lick it clean. His cum tasted surprisingly sweet and she wanted to savor such a delicious flavor. She looked up at him with a smile. How was that, Naruto-kun? Naruto smiled back at her and gave her thumbs up. That was amazing, Ayame-chan. You nearly ed me dry, he said and she giggled. You know, that was the first time I've ever done something like. I didn't know if I would be good, she said shyly. Naruto's eyes widened. So, you've never. She nodded with a small blush on her face. Not yet. I've always wanted to wait for the right person, she replied, staring at him when she said, right person. Naruto felt his heartbeat a little faster. Naruto-kun, come here. She spread her arms out and Naruto kneeled down and embraced her. It felt somewhat awkward for him to hug her when he was from the waist down and she was fully clothed, but he didn't care. Ayame buried her head in the crook of his neck and played with his soft curls of blonde hair. Naruto rubbed small circles over her back and held her close, his flaccid already hardening. Ayame's eyes widened as she felt the large appendage pressed against her stomach. He had just cummed. How could he possibly already be ready to go again? Especially with the insane amount of cum he just released. How can you already be so hard, Naruto-kun? Naruto grinned at her and placed a kiss on her forehead. It's because you're so Ayame-chan. Ayame sighed happily and snuggled against him, causing his hardened rod to become trapped between her luscious, cloth-covered thighs. She looked up at him with caring eyes. Naruto-kun, I really like you a lot, but I don't think I'm ready for that. She looked really nervous as she told him this, but Naruto just simply smiled at her and pulled her closer, desperately trying to ignore the nice feeling of his trapped between her thighs. The pressure on it felt really nice, but now was not the time act with his smaller head. I understand, Ayame-chan. She smiled at him gratefully. Thanks, Naruto-kun. Now, her hand slid to the head of his, which was poking out between her thighs. She gently rubbed it up and down and smiled mischievously at him. Naruto groaned at the workings of her skillful hand. Why don't I take care of your little problem? While her hand worked wonders on his throbbing erection, her free hand reached up and cupped her. She squeezed her mound and winked at him. Help me take this off. Naruto didn't need to be told twice. His hands quickly moved to the bottom of her shirt and he pulled it over her head, taking in every bit of flesh revealed to him. His eyes landed on two large, bra-clad S that looked insanely perky and bouncing. He stared in awe at the beautiful mounds, and Ayame blushed under his intense stare. She enjoyed the fact that she could render him speechless and aroused, even with her clothes still on, if the twitching of his was any indication. Deciding to make his jaw drop to the floor, Ayame used her free hand to reach behind her back. With one single action, Ayame's bra fell into her lap, landing on top of Naruto's aroused head and exposing her globes to Naruto's hungry eyes. Naruto couldn't believe how beautifully shaped and big Ayame's S were. They were much bigger than they appeared, but Naruto figured that was because of the multiple layers of clothing Ayame wore when working at the ramen stand, which was the only time he ever really saw her. Though they were big, around mid-D cup if he had to guess, they fit perfectly on her slender frame. They weren't nearly as big as Tsunade's massive jugs, but that suited him just fine. They were perfect to him. The flesh on them was a shade lighter than the rest of her tan skin, but that only seemed to add a more erotic look to them. Pink nipples surrounded by light brown areolas stood out erect and hard, the sight of which caused Naruto to lick his lips in anticipation. "They're beautiful, Ayame-chan." He literally couldn't take his eyes off of them as he told her. Ayame blushed at the compliment and pushed them out toward him. "Don't just stare, Naruto-kun. They're all yours." Naruto didn't hesitate. His mouth descended on one of her nipples and one hand cupped her other. Ayame moaned at the wonderful feeling of Naruto's mouth sealed around her tit and the massaging of her. Closing her eyes in absolute pleasure, Ayame reached her hand down and removed her discarded bra on Naruto's erection. She threw it somewhere on the floor and resumed her pleasurable work on his. Precum was once again gushing out of his head slit like crazy. Her hand slid up and down the exposed head and shaft poking out between her thighs with ease, the precum lubricating. She focused mostly on the head, which seemed to have the most effect on him, causing the blonde shinobi to moan against her giving her added pleasure. Ayame shivered as Naruto began to glide his tongue around her erect nipple, while his other hand groped and teased her other. The sensation felt so amazing. Ayame felt her underwear become damp with her own juices. Naruto could hear her breathing increase as he worked magic on her gorgeous globes of Y flesh. They were big, perky, and fantastically soft. So soft, in fact, Naruto couldn't resist laying his head against them, much like he would with his own pillow. Ayame smiled at the intimate gesture and used her free hand to softly caress his cheek. Her other hand was still jerking off his engorged head, and Naruto's mouth and hand was still lavishing her with special attention. The two lovers were literally mashed together, covered in sweat and their exchanged saliva. Both were fully determined to give the other person as much pleasure as possible, and they were doing a damn good job of it. But Naruto wanted to give her more. Removing his hand from her, Naruto trailed his fingers down her flat stomach, lightly touching the skin. Ayame's breathing picked up rapidly as she realized where his hand was going. She wanted him to touch her there, yes, but she was still slightly nervous, which made her laugh a little inside. She had swallowed his delicious, copious amounts of sperm, and was currently getting her wonderfully ravished by Naruto's skilled hands and mouth. Why should she be nervous? Before Naruto's hand even reached her pants, Naruto looked up at her from his comfortable spot in between in her "Is this okay, Ayame-chan?" he asked, and his eyes showed genuine worry for her. All of her nervousness left her immediately. In that one question, Ayame knew he truly cared for her and would never hurt her. He would be the first person to touch her most sacred place, and, eventually, he would be the person to take her virginity. She loved him very much, though she hadn't gathered up enough courage to tell him, and would only allow him to touch her. Ayame gave him a big smile and bent down to place a loving kiss on the top of his head. "It's okay, Naruto-kun. I want you to," she whispered to him, and Naruto smiled back at her. "Could you lie on your back?" he asked. Ayame nodded. The couple disentangled from one another. Naruto slipped out from between her thighs and he missed the nice pressure they applied to it, but he wanted to make Ayame feel good. She had done plenty for him already and now it was his turn. "Wait," Naruto said before Ayame could lie down on the floor. Naruto grabbed his jumpsuit and laid it down on the floor to provide Ayame a little bit of comfort. "Go ahead." She shot him a grateful smile and laid down on his jumpsuit. She inhaled and sighed happily. The jumpsuit had a smell on it that was distinctly Naruto and it made her feel more relaxed. She looked up to see Naruto staring intently at her heaving and she smiled seductively at him. She cupped both her and pressed them together and moaned. She watched as Naruto's twitched at her little display, stilling leaking precum from her earlier ministrations. "See something you like, Naruto-kun?" she asked huskily. Naruto gulped and fought down a nosebleed. She was so unbelievably wide that he couldn't help but worship her body. Drool started gathering at the corner of his mouth. Ayame giggled at the entranced look on his face. I'll take that as a yes. Her hands moved from her S and slowly slid down to the top of her pants, going agonizingly too slow, in Naruto's opinion. Ayame's finger slipped underneath her pants and gripped the top. She winked at him and slowly pulled them below her hips, giving him a good look at her white panties, which matched her bra. With help from Naruto, she managed to get her pants down to her knees, leaving Naruto plenty of room and access to her still clothed opening. Ayame started getting excited as Naruto's hands landed on her thighs, getting closer to her underwear with every passing second. Cammy, the anticipation was killing her. Her was already moist with her arousal and she desperately wanted Naruto to bring her to her release. His hands, such big, strong hands, finally arrived at her hips and gripped the edge of her panties. Naruto and Ayame both inhaled breaths of air at the same time as he slowly slid the piece of clothing down her thighs. Ayame, are you in there? The two lovers froze at the sound of her father's voice. Why are the curtains down? Ayame and Naruto stared at each other in panic. Get dressed. Quickly. Ayame whispered, yelled, and the two scrambled to find their respective clothes. Knock. 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 Ayame. Chuki's voice could be heard just outside the side door. Naruto hurriedly zipped up his jumpsuit and Ayame was trying to straighten up her hair and shirt. All during this time, the same thought kept running through Naruto's head. Shit, 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 shit. If he catches us, no more ramen. Ayame had different thoughts. So close, so close, so close. Cammy, why do you hate me? Naruto-kun was just about to eat me out. She had a depressed look on her face while she finished cleaning up her appearance. Is there another way out of here? Naruto whispered in her ear and Ayame barely suppressed a shiver from his warm breath against her ear. There's one in the back. You better hurry. Naruto could hear the sadness in her voice, and it made his heart break. He placed a loving kiss on her lips. He meant for it to be brief, but Ayame grabbed the back of his head and kept him there. They shared a very passionate kiss for several seconds, breaking apart when Chuki once again knocked on the door. Ayame smiled at Naruto, love literally sparkling in her eyes. Come back soon, Naruto-kun. Very soon, Naruto said, returning her smile. He placed one last kiss on her lips and moved toward the door. Before opening the door, he said two words that made her heart soar, believe it. And then quickly exited the building. Ayame watched him leave and sighed happily. I do believe it, Naruto-kun, she thought with a smile as she went to open the door for her father. While one part of her brain was still thinking of our favorite blonde, the other was focused on coming up with a good excuse for closing the shop down early. I'm sorry, Tsunade. I was feeling a little faint so I took a quick nap. Needless to say, Ayame had her father wrapped around her little finger, and he believed her completely. Naruto walked down the street with his arms crossed behind his head and whistling a happy tune. Though they were interrupted, Naruto enjoyed his time with Ayame immensely and looked forward to when they could do it again. Next time, hopefully uninterrupted, they could pick up where they left off. Ah, man, I'm getting hard just thinking about it. Thank Cammy I'm wearing my jumpsuit. Naruto. Naruto turned and smiled at the person. Hey, Sakura-chan. What's up? Sakura stared at him with an impatient look on her face, and Naruto could tell she was angry about something. She folded her arms across her chest. I've been looking for you everywhere, Naruto. Where have you been? Her tone of voice made Naruto cringe a little. Well, you see. Doesn't matter. Tsunade-sama wants to see you immediately. Naruto's mind completely froze as the words left her mouth. Did Tsunade somehow find out about last night? What for? Sakura sighed. She wouldn't tell me. It must be very important. Her eyes narrowed at him. Did you do something wrong? Naruto avoided her gaze and started to sweat. I gotta go. Shouldn't make Granny wait. Wait. Sakura yelled, but Naruto ignored her. He jumped onto a nearby rooftop and disappeared in the sea of buildings. Sakura growled in anger and punched a nearby wall. It crumbled under her chakra-enhanced punch and civilians around the area were shaking in fear at the massive killer intent she was unleashing. Damn him. I will find out. Naruto. Believe it. She blinked. Damn. Now, I sound like him. I'm going to kill you. Naruto. Naruto had heard the saying, dead man walking, but he never fully understood it until now. He stared at the door to Tsunade's office, fidgeting uncomfortably. He had been standing here for the last 5 minutes, desperately trying to come up with the courage to enter and face his almost certain demise. Damn it. Maybe I should just leave and become a rogue. He briefly entertained the idea of leaving the village for his survival, but immediately shot down that idea. Despite how scared he was right now, Naruto knew he didn't have it in him to run away from a problem. Hell, he had never ran away in his entire life. Now shouldn't be different. Okay. Deep breaths. She might not even know. Just go in there, talk with her, and get the hell out. Plain and simple, steeling himself for what might happen, Naruto pushed open the door to Tsunade's office. The sight that greeted him was not unexpected. Tsunade sat behind her large desk, examining what Naruto believed were mission reports. Against his own wishes, Naruto's eyes landed on her which were resting on the flat surface of the desk, causing them to look even perkier and bigger than they usually did. Memories of his actions the night before quickly caused a reaction in the lower half of his body, but he used every shred of willpower he had to prevent his large organ from swelling with arousal. He knew, with perfect clarity, the sheer beauty of the two large orbs of flesh that were barely confined by her gray robe. He knew the sensual roundness and light pink hue of her large areoles, ending in prominent tips that begged to be serviced and worshipped. Naruto remembered the magnificent sight of his ejaculate coating her voluminously, and seeing them made him want to do so again. Though his time with Ayame not too long ago emptied him of some of his semen reserves, Naruto had no doubt he could manage to produce copious amounts of the thick liquid, especially if it was aimed toward the busty Senju. Tsunade eventually glanced up and a smile spread across her face as she saw him. She turned her attention away from the reports and beckoned him closer. Come sit, Naruto. We have much to discuss. She sounded cheerful to Naruto, leading him to believe she had no knowledge of his activities the previous night, but he still remained cautious as he approached the large red chair situated in front of her desk. His eyes never leaving her smiling face, Naruto gingerly sat down. He was genuinely surprised to feel great comfort and firmness from the otherwise uncomfortable-looking chair. Settling himself, Naruto urged his body to remain calm and unmoving as he gazed into Tsunade's honey-colored eyes. Now, Tsunade leaned forward, resting her elbows on the surface of the desk and placing her hands below his chin. How goes your training? She asked. Naruto shifted in his seat and grinned at her. It appeared this meeting would be the same as always. He felt relief wash over him. Well, I've made great improvements with my elemental Rasengan. I've managed to condense my wind chakra into a more stable and mobile form, but I haven't been able to find a foolproof way of unleashing it without injuring myself, he finished bitterly. Ever since his fight with Kakazu, Naruto had been working tirelessly to find a way to use his wind style, Rasengan, without damaging the cells in his arm. He recently realized that it was impossible unless he somehow managed to throw it at his enemy instead of plunging into the enemy's torso. Stability was key and so was mobility. Naruto wanted his improved version of the wind style, Rasengan, to be effective at a great range without losing power. That was the hardest part and he had yet to figure it out. I'm sure you'll figure it out soon, Naruto, she said reassuringly, a small smile gracing her face. You have a knack for doing the impossible. Naruto blushed at the praise, causing her to chuckle lightly. Anything else? I've also been trying to improve other wind-style jutsu that I have learned. Granted, the progress is slow, considering I'm focusing much of my efforts on the Rasengan, even with the aid of clones, he informed, a small blush still present on his marked cheeks. Sounds like you've been busy lately, Tsunade commented. What about your shadow clones? What do you mean? Naruto asked confusingly. Tsunade grinned at him, but it wasn't an ordinary grin. This grin was predatory and mischievous, such that Naruto couldn't help but cringe. Well, from what I know, clones shouldn't be able to produce real semen. That statement caused Naruto's blood to run cold. She knew. His worst fears had been confirmed. He slumped in his seat and ran a hand nervously through his hair. Are you going to kill me? I toyed with the idea for a brief moment, but I decided against. Naruto gaped. You did. Hope blossomed inside him. Maybe he would survive this. Oh, yes, she still maintained her predatory grin. I was awake the entire time, Naruto. I could have killed you if I wished, but your actions last night weren't entirely unappreciated. What do you mean? Tsunade leaned back into her chair, deliberately pushing out her impressive bust. Naruto's eyes followed her movements greedily. You still think about these, don't you? Her hands moved up to her chest and cupped her sensually. She smirked as Naruto's eyes literally bugged out. I'll take that as a yes. You see, Naruto, last night was the first time I had been with a man for a very long time and the first time I have been with one so well equipped. She shivered at the delightful memory of his mercilessly pounding into her as his clones forced their down her throat. Tsunade winked at him. And your clones. I have never been so filled before. I want to feel that wonderful sensation again. In exchange for not killing you, you will perform this act again and again, whenever I please. I do believe you will not offer protest against this, am I right? Naruto simply nodded. That is a agreeable punishment. Can we start now? He asked excitedly. Tsunade chuckled at his eagerness. She slid her green jacket off and grabbed the edges of her gray robe. Smiling seductively at him, Tsunade pulled it open to reveal her magnificent and wondrous orbs of amazing flesh. Naruto watched them jiggle with her every movement as the Hokage maneuvered from her chair and onto the desk. She scattered the papers and pens on the desk to the floor, not in the least caring of where they fell. Once the surface was clear, Tsunade scooted on the desk until she sat right in front of the seated young man. Eyes never leaving him, Tsunade slowly pulled off her pants, revealing to Naruto her hairless snatch, as beautiful as he had seen the night before. Naruto's instantly sprang to full mast, becoming very evident even with his thick jumpsuit. Tsunade spread her legs. How about we start now? She said sensually, her opening already glistening with excited arousal. Naruto stood up from his seat and immediately set to the task of unzipping his jumpsuit. After removing his jumpsuit, Naruto pulled his black undershirt over his head and discarded his boxers, both joining his jumpsuit on the floor. With his member free from its confines, Tsunade got a good look at the almost 10-inch monster in front of her. His long rod was formed with countless big veins, filled and expanded to the breaking point with blood. His swollen head twitched with eagerness and dripped with voluminous amounts of precum. Directly below this impressive manhood were two equally impressive balls, no doubt filled with copious amounts of his delicious and thick cream. Add in his lean and muscular physique, handsomely feral good looks and the youth of this young man, Naruto looked like a god to Tsunade. Stretch me with your rock hard, Naruto, that was all the encouragement Naruto needed. He positioned his member at her dripping opening and shoved his entire length inside of her. Damn, Naruto groaned, the feeling of her tight cunt overwhelming his senses. Oh, Kami, it's so big, Tsunade yelled as he began to thrust. She wrapped her legs around his buttocks, begging him to go deeper and harder. Naruto complied and picked up his pace to rapid speeds, his hips becoming a blur. With every long and hard thrust, Tsunade felt Naruto's head bump mercilessly against her cervix, each time coming closer to entering her womb and reaching into her deepest depths. The way his overstretched her sensitive walls caused Tsunade to see stars and wonder how she had possessed the willpower to remain unmoving the previous night. The massive intake of alcohol might have been a factor, but now Tsunade was turned into a quivering and lust-filled mess. Naruto couldn't describe the wonderful feeling of Tsunade's. Every inch of his was subjected to her walls massaging and pulling the sensitive skin, and he fought to resist coming right there and then. He knew he could come multiple times without going soft, yet the young blonde wanted to make the Senju beauty experience her own release first. Wanting to add to the goddess's pleasure, Naruto leaned forward and captured one of her giant nipples in his mouth. Oh, that's it. On my tits. On my huge ass that you love so much. She kept one hand on the desk to steady herself, but used the other one to grab the back of Naruto's head and further bury him in her bountiful and bouncing bust. Naruto growled against her chest and continued to lavish her s with his tongue and lips, coating the soft and tender flesh in his warm saliva. His tongue flicked and teased her erect nipple, eliciting moans of approval from Tsunade, while his free hand groped her other bouncing orb. The combined ministrations of Naruto's tongue, hands, and erection quickly brought the older woman to her first climax of the day. I'm going to come, Naruto. Naruto felt her inner walls become unbearably tight and knew that his own orgasm was not too far behind. With a loud, ecstasy-filled scream, Tsunade's release hit full force and she tightened her grip around Naruto's head, nearly suffocating him with her enormous S. Her juices bathed his rod and splashed on his balls as she rode the pleasurable and mind-numbing orgasm, the biggest one she had enjoyed in a long time. Just as her release ended, Naruto felt his own rapidly approach. I'm gonna come. Where do you want it? He asked, not stopping his thrusts. Tsunade was breathing heavily and flushed from the neck up. She gazed down and watched his ramming rod enter her dripping, mesmerized by the bulge it created in her stomach. She couldn't believe such a large and thick object could fit inside her without breaking her in two. Juices splashed and leaked out with every thrust, creating loud, wet slapping noises that only further served to increase her arousal, even after such a powerful orgasm. Her eyes shifted to his mop of blonde hair just below her chin and buried into her chest. Suddenly, she knew where she wanted his gallon-sized load. Shoot it on my S. Naruto glanced up from his prime spot and nodded. Quickly, he stopped his thrusts and removed his head from her S, standing up straight and jerking off his. Tsunade laid down completely on the desk and smashed her S together, ready to receive his load. Naruto aimed his at her magnificent jugs and felt his balls stir. Shit. Here it comes. Not a moment later, a large rope of cum erupted from his member and splattered onto her S. KKK. Another dozen thick globes of the white cream shot out of his, bathing Tsunade's chest in a sticky and thick cover. So great was the amount that some landed on her face and stomach, much to the enjoyment of Tsunade, who opened her mouth to taste his delicious seed. She was not disappointed. A particularly large glob landed directly on her tongue, stimulating her taste buds and warming her belly as she swallowed the sweet substance. As his orgasm lessened, the globs turned into drips and drizzles of cum that still cascaded onto her S, further coating them in his seed. Finally, after several minutes, Naruto's orgasm subsided and he surveyed the mess he created. Wow, he commented. Tsunade grinned. Yeah, wow, she concurred. She gathered up a good amount of cum on her hand and greedily ate each cum-covered finger. Tastes very sweet, like dessert. The sight alone caused Naruto's to twitch and harden once more. Is that normal? He asked, watching her sensually eat his seed. No, she gathered up more of his cum. It usually tastes bitter and salty, but yours. Yours tastes very sweet. Delicious even. She ate more, each time gathering more, but still barely making a dent in the coating on her chest and stomach. She shivered at a sudden warm feeling inside of her. And it warms my stomach and makes me feel energetic. She meant to say younger, but desperately did not want to remind Naruto of her greater age. He gazed upon her body as if she were a young woman and Tsunade wanted it to stay that way. Interesting. Tsunade held out a finger, which had a single string of cum dangling from it. Try some. I don't think so. Come on. It's your own cum. I know that, but it's still weird. Tsunade sat up on the desk, still holding out her finger. It's very sweet. I guarantee you won't regret it. Though the thought of tasting his own cum didn't sound appealing, Naruto was actually curious to see if what she said was true. Deciding to be a little adventurous, Naruto tentatively licked her finger. It is sweet, he commented, and he surprised Tsunade by continuing to on her finger. See, delicious, isn't it? After licking her finger clean, he pulled away. Surprisingly, yes, his eyes raked across her body, ready to go again. Tsunade smiled. Can't resist. Hell no. I'm a healthy teenage boy who is in front of a beautiful woman. I could keep going forever, Naruto proudly declared, puffing out his chest, causing Tsunade to giggling at his antics. Create 3 clones. I feel in the mood for some more dessert. Naruto grinned and formed his signature hand sign. 3 clouds of smoke appeared in a pop. Once the smoke cleared, 3 equally and aroused Narutos stared at Tsunade's body with lust-filled eyes. Tsunade winked at the clones and moved off the desk and onto the floor on her knees. Naruto and his clones quickly encircled her, their erect members pointing straight at her. Tsunade grabbed 2 clones' and began to jerk them off. Naruto stepped forward and placed his head near her lips, where he immediately started to push. Tsunade opened her mouth wide and Naruto shoved a good portion of his into her mouth. Ah, your mouth feels so good, Tsunade-chan. She mumbled something around his, further stimulating his sensitive member. The remaining clone moved to Naruto's side and smacked his between her using the remaining cum on them to slide easily between them. While having her throat cunt spread by the real Naruto's tasty meat, Tsunade serviced the 2 clones' expertly. Her soft hands focused mostly on their sensitive heads, using their pre-cum as an excellent lubricant. The clones became putty in her hands. They moaned and groaned, occasionally shooting large globs of pre-cum onto her hands and arms. They showed their appreciation by massaging her shoulders and back and muttering encouraging remarks. You're the best, Tsunade-chan. One of them said. You're amazing. I love your tits. That one came from the clone ing her Tsunade felt extremely proud that she could cause such pleasure for 4 young men at the same time. She increased the speed of her hands on their and began to deep-throat Naruto. The blonde himself shivered in delight. His head was bumping the back of her throat and her tongue slid wonderfully against the underside of his shaft. She was trying to milk him for every drop and she would soon succeed, if the stirring in his balls was any indication. The clone ing her marveled at how soft Tsunade's jugs were. He groped and pressed her together, increasing the tightness on his. The globes of flesh were slick and wet with the real Naruto's cum, but he didn't care. Remembering what his creator had discovered just a little while ago, the clone leaned his head forward and captured one of her cum-covered tits with his mouth. The sweetness quickly ed his taste buds and he hummed against her bosom, bending down at an angle to comfortably on her tit while still ramming his between them. Like his creator, the clone could feel his impending orgasm arriving soon and increased his thrusts and rough groping. His actions caused Tsunade to moan around Naruto's, effectively pushing him over the edge. Drink every drop, Tsunade-chan. Naruto yelled, grabbing her head and forcing every inch down her throat. His orgasm hit literally with a bang. One unbelievably large blast of cum shot straight into her stomach, filling it with almost a liter in a single second. After the first blast, smaller, yet still impressive, shots added to the growing amount of precious seed in her stomach. Tsunade desperately tried to keep up with the ridiculous quantities of cum. She had to swallow every few seconds or risk losing some of his delicious milk, and she did not want that. She could feel the cum traveling through his long rod and pouring down her throat. The warm and erotic sensation turned her on to the point where her was gushing juices, creating a small puddle on the floor. The clone playing with her tits only added to her arousal. Naruto sighed as his orgasm finished. Tsunade's throat was divine, and he wanted nothing more than to it again, but through his mental connection with his clones he knew they too wanted to empty themselves in her mouth and he would not deny them such a pleasure. He pulled out of her throat slowly, savoring the wet and warm feeling. Once completely out, Tsunade looked up at him with sparkling amber eyes and grinned. Do your clones wish to fill my stomach with their cum, Naruto? Naruto returned the grin. The clone in her S looked as though he would blow any second, and the faces of the two clones receiving a hand job told him everything of their current status. I believe so. How about it, guys? Yeah, they replied in unison. The clone tending to her S moved from his heavenly spot and shoved his into her mouth. Tsunade obliged and happily began to on the twitching member. He would come very soon, she realized with glee. Boss, her mouth is even better than her S. The clone praised. One clone receiving a hand job stepped beside him, holding his own member near her mouth. I can't hold it back. I want to fill her stomach now. He pressed his head at the corner of her lips and slowly pushed forward. Tsunade's eyes widened as she felt the clones join his fellow clones, stretching her mouth even more. She now had two huge S sandwiched together in her mouth, both relentlessly in her throat. It started to become difficult to breathe, so she expanded her throat and mouth using her chakra. She used this method the night before when such a thing occurred, and it worked wonders. Even with two thick rods pounding her throat, Tsunade still had plenty of room. Her eyes moved up to the clone she was giving a hand job. He wanted to come in her stomach as much as his brothers, and she would give him the pleasure. She pointed to her stuffed mouth with her free hand, and the clone seemed to understand immediately. He positioned himself beside the original throat-in clone and pushed his at the corner of her mouth. Now that's amazing, the real Naruto stated as he leaned against the desk, watching the spectacle before him. The sight of Tsunade's mouth stretched with 3S aroused him greatly, and apparently Tsunade, if the puddle of fluids dripping from between her thighs were any indication. Getting an idea, Naruto moved behind Tsunade. Falling to his knees, he wrapped his strong arms around her waist and placed the tip of his near her opening. He felt her tense and her legs quiver as he slowly traced her opening with its head. One of his hands trailed down her stomach and touched her. More juices escaped her entrance while his fingers teased her and his traced circles around her labia. If the 3S weren't in her throat, Tsunade knew she would surely cry out in pleasure at his ministrations. Just as she felt she couldn't stand his teasing any longer, Naruto shoved his full length inside of her. Her orgasm triggered instantly. She moaned around the 3-pounding S as she rode her release. The clones, who were already extremely close to their own release, couldn't take her vibrating mouth any longer. Throwing their heads back, all 3 of the clones exploded inside of her mouth. Tsunade's cheeks expanded comically from the ungodly amounts of semen, and she struggled to swallow it all with Naruto's pummeling her. Unfortunately, she could not keep up with the large amount, and some overflowed from the corners of her mouth. Cum dribbled down her chin and gathered in the valley of her S, trailing down her sternum and ending at her opening, where it mixed with her own juices. With dozens of giant globs of cum pouring down her throat, Tsunade's stomach rapidly expanded and became round, giving her the appearance of a woman several months pregnant. Tsunade felt dizzy from the gallons of warm cum entering her stomach, but savored the flavor of such sweet spunk. Finally, the clone's orgasm ran dry, and one by one removed their S from her stretched mouth. No sooner did they pull out, Tsunade cried out in ecstasy as Naruto's grip around her waist tightened and his pace increased. He hoisted her above his lap, momentarily pulling out his, and skewered his member back in with great force. Oh, Kami. Naruto, 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 she cried out, his finding the right spot. Her S bounced up and down, slapping her bulging, cum-filled belly. The clones watched the performance with great interest. They lightly stroked their flaccid members as their creator ravaged the beautiful Hokage. Naruto buried his face into her long hair, which had fell out of her 2 ponytails due to her bouncing. He inhaled and savored the rich smell of vanilla and, if he had to guess, strawberries. Oh, how he loved strawberries, though ramen would have been a much better fragrance. He put the thought aside for later as his attention returned to the blonde goddess he was currently satisfying. Tell me what you want. He whispered to her, his lips brushing her ear. Tsunade shivered and turned her head, looking him directly in his blue eyes. She was shocked to see something other than lust in them. She saw love and affection. Suddenly, the memory of his parting words from last night rang through her thoughts. I love you. He had said that to her with such feeling and emotion that she knew he must have meant it. She desperately wanted to tell him that she wasn't worth his love, that she was well too old for him to engage in a relationship. But she couldn't resist him. Tsunade wanted him, both physically and emotionally. She wanted his love. Your seed, she whispered back, filling my womb to the brim. And, she placed a kiss on his lips, you. Naruto smiled at her and captured her lips with passion. Then come with me, my goddess, he said against her lips. Their lip lock grew with great intensity, as did their lovemaking. Tsunade raised her hips and met his upward thrusts. His hands cupped her and squeezed each orb. Tsunade moaned into the kiss and fisted his hair. They were both so close to sweet release, so close to truly becoming one, and so close to becoming true lovers. Finally, Tsunade's orgasm arrived, triggering Naruto's own. They both moaned into each other's mouths as their releases sent shivers and shudders through their bodies. Squeezing her hard, Naruto's erupted inside her womb, bathing the walls of her womb in his seed. Once her womb became overfilled, his cum leaked and guzzled out of her stretched opening, mixing with her juices and adding to the large puddle of fluids on the floor. Even after their orgasms subsided, the two ninja remained in their positions, enjoying the warmth they shared. His remained firmly buried inside of her, occasionally shooting another glob of cum. Despite this being his third orgasm, Naruto's still remained hard and ready for more. You're insatiable, Tsunade said, grinning at him. Naruto fondled her and kissed the nape of her neck. Insatiable for you, Tsunade-chan, he ate on the tender flesh, ready for round 2. Absolutely, she gazed at the 3 clones slowly stroking their how about 2 more clones? He quickly formed the hand sign and 2 more clones appeared. Oh, yes. This will be fun. Naruto-kun. She winked at the clones. Think you can keep up, boys? The resounding chorus of affirmative replies could be heard echoing throughout the room. Do I really have to wear this? Tsunade asked, an embarrassed blush dusting her cheeks. Why are you complaining? You look why. It's a little tight. Only because you fill it out so wonderfully. Naruto said exuberantly, his eyes drinking in her erotic appearance. Standing before him was the beautiful and busty Senju, wearing a skin-tight nurse outfit that left little to the imagination. The outfit consisted of a button-up white coat and a white skirt, complete with a pair of sleek, black heels. The white coat, made of thin, cotton material, struggled to contain Tsunade's head-sized The buttons holding the 2 sides of the coat together were on the verge of breaking under the huge strain. Tsunade could only get the bottom half of the buttons to successfully hold. The top half could not be buttoned up no matter how hard she tried, revealing large amounts of her bountiful cleavage. As a testament to her failure, 2 buttons were missing, torn off from the excessive force she used in her attempt to button the whole thing. The coat was about 4 sizes too small for Tsunade, so it ended just below her showing off her nicely toned stomach and the flare of her hips. Tsunade wore no shirt or bra underneath, so her nipples could clearly be seen poking against the thin fabric, further fueling her appearance. Just like the coat, the skirt she wore was several sizes too small for her voluptuous frame. Tsunade's large jutted out drastically from her slender back, stretching the material of the skimpy skirt to the point of almost ripping. With her big derriere taking up most of the skirt, and the fact it was too small, it barely went mid-thigh, exposing Tsunade's legs and most of her thighs. Her overall posture looked more firm with the aid of her black heels, but also gave her some extra height. Tsunade was already taller than most women in Konoha, standing at 5 feet and 10 inches, nearly 6 inches taller than the average woman, civilian and kunoichi alike. The heels added 2 inches to her already impressive height, putting her past 6 feet. Naruto stood at only 5 feet and 8 inches, the average height for men in Konoha. Rather than feel uncomfortable with their height difference, Naruto actually found Tsunade's height attractive. To him, it only added to her beauty. After all, it would have looked quite comical if Tsunade was short with such a large bust. The mental image caused Naruto to nearly burst out laughing. Speaking of Naruto, the description of his current status of attire could be put into one word. Yes. Naruto lay on Tsunade's bed as the day he was born. Since they had started their UAL exploits a week ago, the two blondes had been using her home as a safe place to have without risking being caught. Their passionate, 8-hour-long session in her office was, now that they looked back on it, very risky. They could have easily been caught by Shizune or a Genin team returning from a mission. While it wasn't illegal for a Hokage to engage in a relationship with one of her subordinates, Tsunade still didn't want to risk it. Any political opponent on the council would use her and Naruto's UAL relationship as a weapon against her. Plenty, including Danzo, would jump at the opportunity to oust her from her position. Combined with their significant age difference, Tsunade didn't want to reveal their relationship anytime soon, and Naruto agreed. But forgetting politics, Tsunade's home provided both comfort and security. The duo could have loud and enjoy it on a comfy bed. What more could they ask for? Oh, yeah, role-playing, at least as far as Naruto was concerned. Can't we just have? Tsunade asked impatiently, eager to begin their lovemaking. While role-playing did appeal to her, Tsunade had been dying for Naruto's all day. Hours of mission reports and paperwork had left her unbelievably horny and, now that she had his erect member in front of her, it took every ounce of willpower not to jump him and force him to give her what she wanted. Huh, that sounds kind of hot. If this role-playing thing works out, maybe we could try it, she thought, still eyeing the piece of meat between his legs. Naruto grinned up at her. We will. Just with a little bit of role-playing. You'll love it. Trust me. Now, get into character. He yelled excitedly. Tsunade sighed. You owe me for this. Tsunade took a deep breath and closed her eyes. When she opened them seconds later, she flashed Naruto a kind smile and bent forward. How are you today, Uzumaki-kun? Are you experiencing any pain? She asked, making a show of doing a quick once-over of his body. Her eyes lingered on his throbbing member a bit longer than the rest of his body, but she managed to stay in character. I'm fine, doctor, but I do feel a painful, throbbing sensation around my lower body. Oh, where exactly? Is it right here? She laid a hand on his knee. Naruto shook his head. No, doctor. A little bit higher. Here. Her hand moved up to his thigh. He shook his head again. Here. Her hand stopped just a mere inch from his. Her soft hands gently rubbing his inner thigh caused Naruto's to throb uncontrollably, but he held in his urges. He was starting to get into this role-playing, and he could tell Tsunade was, too. No. Well, Uzumaki-kun, Yumura's causing you trouble. He nodded and she smiled sympathetically. I thought so. Before I can give you a diagnosis, I'm going to need you to ejaculate. Naruto looked at her confusedly. Why? I want to make sure everything is functioning properly. Now, I notice you have rather large testicles. Is it safe to you ejaculate quite a bit of semen when you experience an orgasm? Naruto had to hand it to her. She was really good at role-playing. If he wasn't in on it, he would truly believe she was a doctor simply examining him for any signs of illness. Yes, ma'am. If you had to guess, how much? She asked, holding a pen and clipboard that Naruto didn't remember seeing just a few seconds ago. Usually about a gallon. Wow, she scribbled something down. Is that normal, doctor? I've never heard of a man ejaculating such a large amount of semen, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. All males ejaculate different amounts. How often do you masturbate? I used to do it a few times a day. If I didn't, the throbbing would become unbearable, almost painful. Used to. What about now? Naruto smiled. I started seeing this wonderful woman and we've been going at it like rabbits ever since. She's really the best, doctor, you would like her. Come to think of it, you two look strikingly similar. Like her, doctor, you are a very beautiful woman. Tsunade blushed and returned his smile. It was hard to stay in character with him saying such sweet things, but Tsunade was now determined to play it out. You're making me blush, Uzumaki-kun. Now, I can confirm you ally active, she wrote down a few words. But I'm puzzled, Uzumaki-kun. If you have been having with this woman constantly, why is your throbbing so much? Surely she would have helped you quell your urges. That's the thing, doctor. She went away for a week-long business trip. It's only been a few days and I'm already going crazy. Why not masturbate, then, Uzumaki-kun? The pain must be killing you. Naruto scratched the back of his head. I've tried, but it's not the same as being with her. No matter how hard, pun intended, I try, I can't seem to have an orgasm. It's caused me much stress over the last few nights. What about pornography? Doesn't help. It's a poor substitute for her beauty. Oh, he was definitely getting some serious action, Tsunade thought. Well, I don't really know how to help you, Uzumaki-kun. You explained the problem, and I was prepared to take a sample of your semen to make sure everything was working properly, but I can't even do that since masturbation doesn't help you. You'll just have to wait until your girlfriend returns to fix the problem for you and provide me a sample. Tsunade did her best to look sympathetic, but she couldn't quite prevent a glint of eagerness that flashed across her face. You could help me, doctor. Tsunade looked puzzled. How could I? Oh, Uzumaki-kun, doctors are not allowed to engage any ULI activities with their patients. It's hospital policy. I'm sorry. But didn't you swear an oath to help your patients, doctor? Yes. And have you ever broken that oath? No, Uzumaki-kun. Then, please, help me. I don't think I could go much longer like this. Tsunade bit her lip and pretended to think hard about the situation. Well, okay, Uzumaki-kun, but none of this leaves the room. Understand? He nodded eagerly. You're the best, doctor. Tsunade smiled at him. I appreciate that, Uzumaki-kun, but please call me Tsunade. Being called doctor makes me feel old. Okay, but only if you call me Naruto. Alright, Naruto-kun. I guess I'll start. Would you prefer to sit up or remain in your current position? I rather like this one, Naruto replied, stretching out across the large bed. Really, it was very comfortable, and getting a handjob while lying down sounded pretty sweet. He spread his legs and pointed at his erection. All yours, Tsunade-chan. He said, grinning. Tsunade licked her lips, but tried to keep a mask of hesitance. Okay, Tsunade got on the bed on her knees, bending carefully to prevent her tight clothing from ripping. She crawled up the mattress, deliberately taking her time. With every shift and movement, her S would bounce and jiggle, each time threatening to spill out of their tight confines. Naruto's eyes never left her chest as she settled between his legs. She reached out tentatively with her hand and lightly gripped the base of his long member. Her eyes widened and she looked up at him. It's very warm, and throbbing. You poor thing, you must really need to ejaculate. Naruto squeezed his eyes shut at the sudden jolt of pleasure. Tsunade's hands were soft and her light ministrations were driving him crazy. The truth was that he hadn't come since yesterday morning, where Tsunade nearly ate him dry with 5 blowjobs. A normal man would be more than satisfied, but Naruto was anything but a normal man. With his godlike stamina and the Kyuubi, Naruto could keep going and going without a break. Even though it had only been a day since he last came, Naruto's balls were already on the brink of bursting. He desperately needed a release and fast. Tsunade-chan, more, please. Tsunade picked up her pace and took his head in her mouth. Hearing the gasp that accompanied her actions, Tsunade began to. Simultaneously receiving both a hand and blowjob was too much for the young blonde. A bucking of his pelvis into her face was the only warning Tsunade received before a fountain of cum shot into her mouth. Immediately, her taste buds were jolted with the sweetest flavor she ever tasted, a flavor she had begun to ate with his cum. For some reason she had yet to understand, Naruto's semen tasted very sweet. She already loved giving him head, but the added flavoring was definitely a big bonus. Suddenly feeling overwhelmed with the amount of cum, Tsunade removed her mouth. She barely had time to swallow the huge load before blasts of the sweet substance splashed onto her forehead. The next 4 blasts hit right above her cleavage and landed on her coat. She managed to swallow the first load and open her mouth just in time to receive the last 2 blasts of cum. She was a little disappointed that they weren't as big as the first ones, but she savored the sweet flavor nonetheless. The fountain of cum finally came, again, pun intended, to an end. Naruto was flushed and panting by the time his orgasm subsided. Cammy, that felt good. Tsunade giggled and wiped cum off her forehead. She licked clean the hand she used, taking a chance to enjoy it. You flatter me. It's wonderful to know that little ol' me can make you cum within a minute. Naruto chuckled. Well, you do a great job, and you just broke character. Oh, tell me, do you want to continue roleplaying or? She tugged at her coat and ripped it off, revealing her big S to him. Some of his cum had drizzled down between her S and lathered the upper part of her stomach. Do you want to give these babies a massage? Roleplaying can wait, he screamed, jumping at her. With a cute squeal, Tsunade was pushed down on the bed with an eager Naruto already groping her S. Naruto marveled as his hands disappeared. That's always a wonderful sight. Tsunade sighed, but had a small smile. Cammy, did this man love her S? Every chance he could get he would cope a feel or deliver a quick grope. Personally, she loved it when he grabbed them. It always sent a thrill up her spine whenever he lavished them with devotion. It also made her feel proud that her body could entice such a handsome young man. I'm starting to think you only like me for my S. She teased, moaning softly when his fingers brushed over her nipple. Naruto frowned and stopped his groping. That's not the only reason, Tsunade-chan. Tsunade raised an eyebrow at his serious tone. Oh, do tell. I like you for many things, he began, laying a kiss on her cheek. I like you for your strength. I mean, nothing's wire than seeing a woman destroy a boulder with a flick of her finger. He smiled, kissed her nose. He noted with satisfaction that she was blushing. And you're super smart. Hell, you know every sickness in the world and at least a dozen cures for each of them. You're the best kunoichi and med nin in the world. He gave her lips a quick kiss. And I love your temper. You look so cute whenever you get mad. It's worth taking a beating to see. I know why Sannin always tries to make you mad. And, his hand caressed her cheek. Well, I love you. Tears welled up in Tsunade's eyes as she heard his confession. She had heard him say it when he thought she passed out, but this was the first time he had said it to her like this. There was so much passion and love put behind that sentence that she believed him. Naruto, she wanted to tell him how she felt, but fear held her back. They couldn't have a romantic relationship. For one thing, their age difference was too great. She was past 50 and he was only 16. She would grow old when he was only in his 20s. It wouldn't be fair to him. And if they ever toyed with the idea of marriage, when she died he would be a widow in his 20s or 30s. She didn't want to put him through it. Plus, he had a yame. Yes, he had told her about a yame. It didn't bother her. Naruto needed to be with someone near his own age group. Someone he could spend the rest of his life with. Not an old woman who used a genjutsu to maintain her youthful appearance. While she didn't mind maintaining their UAL relationship, she didn't want to mix emotions into this. Naruto, don't say that. What? Naruto asked, shock written across his face. We can't have this, a real relationship. Naruto slid off her and sat cross-legged beside her. He stared at her, eyes filled with hurt and confusion. Why? Is this about a yame? Tsunade, I can, He stopped when she placed a finger on his lips. It's not about Ayame. She's wonderful, a great match for you. I know you like her a lot. She removed her finger and took his hand in hers. You're 16, Naruto. Do you know how old I am? Naruto was silent. I'm 52, Naruto. That's a big age difference. Do you honestly want to commit yourself to a relationship with such an old woman? It doesn't matter to me, Tsunade. I don't care about age. Don't say it. I'm not trying to be mean, Naruto, but we cannot be in a relationship, at least, not romantically. You should be with someone your own age, like Ayame or Sakura, if it doesn't work out with Ayame. She likes you a lot, she's just afraid to confess. So does that Hyuga, Hinata. You have a lot of girls your age who like you. We can still enjoy, Naruto. I don't mind you going off and dating some girl and you're the only man I'll have with, so you don't have to worry. We can't be a couple. Friends with benefits, yes, but not a couple, and if things get serious between you and another girl, then we'll have to call it off. It wouldn't be fair to her. Do you understand, Naruto? We can be together physically, but that's it. Naruto remained silent, eyes cast down on the sheets. Please, don't be upset, Naruto. She sat up, still bare, and grasped his hands. She rubbed small circles on each hand with her thumbs. Naruto, he continued to stare at the sheets, refusing to meet her concern-filled, honey-colored eyes. Tsunade could feel her heart break at the sight of a depressed Naruto. Naruto, please look at me, she pleaded. Naruto finally looked at her, but instead of tears or a frown, a smile was present. I understand, Tsunade-chan. He said, smiling at her. And you don't have to apologize. You're right, this is for the best. Tsunade looked doubtful. Are you sure you're okay with this, Naruto? As she predicated, he simply nodded and continued to smile. Yes, Tsunade-chan, I am. He squeezed her hand reassuringly before rolling off the bed. Tsunade watched as he gathered up his clothes. Where are you going? Tsunade asked, now worried. Well, I have some things to do. Pick up some groceries, buy a few kunai, and pay the rent, it's actually due today. He replied, putting on his boxers. I'll probably be late with the payment, but the old man who owns the complex will understand. He's a nice guy. It's 10 p.m. Naruto. Isn't it a little late for shopping? Naruto pulled his shirt over his head. I know some places that stay open till midnight, might as well get some errands done. You can stay the night, you know. She said quickly. The bed's more than big enough for two. You know that. Naruto finished zipping up his jumpsuit. He walked over to her and bent down to place a kiss on her forehead. He lingered for a few moments then pulled away. Once again, he smiled at her. I know, but I really should get going. Maybe tomorrow night. Sound good? She nodded. He turned to leave, but she grabbed his hand, stopping him. How about a quickie? I know one time isn't enough for you. He smiled. I'll manage. Good night, Tsunade-chan. He gently pried his hand out of hers and winked. Rest up. You're going to need it. Tomorrow night, I'm going to break a personal record. Believe it. She returned his smile. Believe it, Naruto. He gave her thumbs up and walked out of the bedroom, leaving Tsunade alone. A moment later, Tsunade heard her front door open, followed by the sound of it closing, signaling that he was gone. Sighing to herself, Tsunade got off the bed and wandered over to her full-length mirror. I hope he's going to be alright, she thought worriedly as she took off her white skirt. She raised each leg up one at a time to remove each heel and immediately felt relief once they were removed. Though sleek and wide, they were also as uncomfortable as hell. She tossed the pair to the side and stared at her reflection. As always, with her genjutsu, her entire body was flawless, resembling the appearance of herself when she was in her late 20s. She hated this part of the day when she had to release the genjutsu for the night and allow her chakra to replenish. She hadn't done it over the past couple of days since Naruto spent the night, and she did not want him to see how old she really looked. The added stress on her chakra reserves was bothersome, but she put up with it for Naruto's sake. She knew he would be instantly repulsed if he saw how she truly looked. Sighing to herself again and wishing that a fountain of youth truly existed, Tsunade dispelled the genjutsu and prepared to face her age. What the? How? What she saw was not at all what she was expecting. Naruto slowly walked home with his hands in his jumpsuit's pockets and a frown on his face. Everything Tsunade said was correct, yet the pain he felt would not cease. He knew he loved her and he suspected she loved him. He desperately wanted them to have a real relationship, something that went beyond just her friendship. But when he really thought about it, he also wanted that with Ayame. How could he love two women at the same time? How could he possibly attempt to date two women? It was wrong, he knew, and immoral. Plus, it wasn't fair to either woman. Tsunade may have been okay with sleeping with him while he pursued Ayame, but how would Ayame feel? He was pretty sure he knew the answer and it wasn't positive. But which should he choose? He loved both of them dearly. Kami, what should I do? He asked aloud, stopping. No answer came. Naruto looked up at the night sky and admired the full moon that cascaded rays of light down onto the darkened streets. He stared at it a while, transfixed by the eerie source of light. It looked so beautiful and ethereal, almost as if it were alive. Shaking his head of such silly notions, Naruto made to continue his journey, but a voice stopped him. What are you doing out so late, Gaki? He turned to see a woman with spiky, purple hair and light brown eyes, wearing a tan overcoat and a dark orange mini-skirt. Underneath her overcoat was a fitted mesh bodysuit that left very little to the imagination. A Konoha headband indicated that she was a kunoichi. It took him a second of staring at her before it dawned on him. Anko-sensei. She smirked at him. In the flesh, Gaki. Thought for a second you didn't recognize me. Naruto chuckled. I'd be hard-pressed to forget about you, Anko-sensei. You made quite an impression on our last mission. Ah, the mission to attack the bandit camp just north of Kaio. My snake summons must have killed hundreds of them, but if I remember correctly, your spiraling chakra technique made quite a large crater, scared the crap out of them. Good times. Anyway, what are you doing out here so late? And why do you look so depressed? Girlfriend dump you or something? Or something, Naruto replied, grinning. She grinned back at him. Just taking a walk to clear my head. Needed to sort out a few things. Anko looked around. Pretty dead part of town to sort something out. No one's around the shopping district past 9. You should know that, Gaki. She glanced at the illuminated night sky. Beautiful night. Perfect time to get a drink. How about it, Gaki? I'm buying. Naruto scratched the back of his head. Well, I don't know. I don't really drink. Well, then, live a little. Come on. You'll have a great time. The Shinobi Bar serves the best sake in Konoha. She sent him a seductive smile. Plus, it's boring without some companionship. You wouldn't let your poor Anko-sensei go to a bar all by her lonesome self, would you? Naruto laughed. Well, if you put it that way, sure. Lead the way, Anko-sensei. Do you know what to do, Conan? Pain asked, his powerful eyes staring directly at her. Conan nodded. Hi. I shall infiltrate Konoha and capture the Kyuubi holder. Good. This is a very important mission, Conan, not just for Akatsuki, but for our goal of eternal peace. Conan nodded again and a determined look showed on her beautiful face. I will not let you down, Pain. Naruto awoke to a massive, mind-numbing headache and an unfamiliar weight on his chest. He first addressed the former. The magnitude of the pain currently resonating in his skull was astronomical. Every time his heart beat, it would pulsate painfully behind his eyes, which weren't in any good shape either. In a lack of judgment, he opened his eyes, only to be blinded by the burning, Kami forbidding morning sunlight. It was as if the sun itself was only a few feet away. He immediately shut his sensitive eyes. Even closed, Naruto could still see bright flashes of multicolored dots dancing around on his inner eyelid. It took several minutes of massaging his closed eyes before he even attempted to open them again. To his immense relief, the sunlight wasn't nearly as harsh as the first time. He still had to squint, but it was infinitely better than being blinded. Finally regaining full vision and feeling his headache lessen in severity, Naruto decided to take stock of his surroundings. He was in a bed, that much was certain. The only problem being that it wasn't his bed and this place was not his apartment. His bed wasn't this comfortable, nor was his apartment this big or lavish. He first noticed a window, the source from which the sunlight entered the room, framed with purple curtains on the wall parallel to the bed. The wall was painted a dark blue and had a small bookcase against it. The rest of the furniture in the room was pretty generic for a bedroom. A nightstand with a digital clock, which was currently flashing 10:32 a.m., a cabinet for clothes next to the doorway, and a large chest at the foot of the bed. It looked to be made of oak, as far as he could tell. He craned his neck for a better look. He froze when he heard a soft, feminine moan. Mentally berating himself for forgetting the weight on his chest, Naruto grabbed the sheets and slowly raised them up. From his distorted memories of last night, he had a good guess of who he would see. His suspicions were confirmed when he saw a familiar mop of dark purple hair. The sight of Anko Mitarashi drooling on his chest while snuggling against him was not something he ever thought he would see in his lifetime. Their bodies were smashed together, so he could feel every curve on her body, every inch of soft, smooth skin. Both of them were completely, he realized, and his erect, throbbing was trapped between the kunoichi's luscious thighs and rubbing against her lower lips. She shifted in her sleep, unknowingly grinding her opening on his length, causing them both to moan. She stirred a little more then stopped moving. Naruto believed she was still asleep, but a slight grin on her face told him something different. Anko-sensei, I know you're awake. Her smile grew wider. Anko-sensei. What happened to Anko-chan? She asked. Her eyes were still closed. He sighed. Anko-chan. Her eyes opened and she lifted her head from his chest. She stared at him with cute, brown eyes that shined with happiness and mischief. Good morning, Naruto-kun. He cringed at the volume of her voice. His head was still pounding. Good morning to you, Anko-chan. She looked joyful that he used a far less formal suffix for her name. Mind telling me how we got like this? Anko frowned. You don't remember? She asked, sadness permeating her words. Naruto racked his brain for anything, any small memory of the night before. Concentrating hard, images flashed across his mind. Slowly, but surely, his memories of last night's events became clearer and soon he remembered with great clarity. I was drunk, very drunk, and you offered to help me get home, but, he paused, your place was much closer, so you offered to let me spend the night. A blush appeared. Did I really grab your butt and say, let me thank you? He asked embarrassingly. Anko smiled and kissed his jaw. Yep. And who was I to turn down such an offer? She kissed his lips. You were an animal last night. I don't think I've ever been so exhausted in my whole life. You took advantage of me, he accused playfully. She laughed. Ah, you loved it. I believe your exact words were, Anko-chan, you're so amazing. I can't get enough. I remember that. I seem to recall you screaming, more. More, while I said that. Don't get why, Naruto-kun. You were the one coming like a damn fountain every 10 minutes. But you were the one gushing every 5 seconds, he pointed out. Anko blushed. Yeah, well, shut up. She buried her face in his neck. Naruto laughed and patted her softly on the back. Did you mean it? She mumbled. Mean what? Her hand trailed down to his hand and grasped it firmly, entwining their fingers. Naruto blushed at the intimate gesture. You told me last night that you liked me. She sounded strangely vulnerable. Did you mean it? Or was that just the alcohol and talking? Naruto really thought about it. He nursed a crush for her after her flamboyant introduction during the Chunin exams. After all, she was hot and a little on the crazy side, plus she dressed revealing. Any teenage boy would fall in love. But over the years, Anko and he had shared many missions together. They shared secrets and stories, enjoying laughs as they sat around a small campfire. He would be lying if he said he didn't like her. The Anko in private was vastly different from the Anko in public, and he felt privileged that she allowed him to see that side of her. I meant it. Anko eyes widened and she pulled away from his neck to look at him directly. You did. I did. He swore he saw a tear in the corner of her eye, but she scratched at her eyes too quickly for him to confirm. Well, I like you too, you brat. But don't let it go to your head. She warned, causing Naruto to chuckle. Too late. Anko Mitarashi likes me. Now my life is complete. She smiled and flicked his nose playfully. Damn right, Naruto-kun. So, what do you want to do now? Well, it's already 11. Don't you think we should get ready? I have a week off from missions, so I have nothing to do. Do you? Naruto remembered telling Tsunade that he would meet her tonight, but he still wasn't ready to face her. Not so soon after she rejected him. He shook his head. I'm free for the day. Great. Then why don't we do a little experimenting? What do you mean? Don't you have some things you've always wanted to try? You ally, I mean. Yeah, we have the day and each other. Why not do them now? The idea caused Naruto's other head to throb in excitement. Anko smirked as she felt his member throb between her thighs. Naruto grinned. What did you have in mind? Konan sighed in relaxation as she finally got a chance to rest her tired feet. She had been moving for most of the night and morning, crossing rough terrain and deep forests. Pain insisted that she leave quickly to pursue the Kyuubi holder. The timing was perfect. With the defeat of Kakazu and Hidan, Konoha didn't believe Akatsuki would make a move so soon after two of its members' deaths. Konan had to admit, things were getting harder with less and fewer members. Sasori wasn't too bad of a loss, and Deidara's death was inevitable, but Kakazu and Hidan were truly a deadly team. Their deaths proved costly, but not impossible to overcome. Itachi and Kisame were still alive, the better of all two-man teams in Akatsuki, barring her and Pain. Zetsu was still active, thank goodness, and Tobi became more active in Akatsuki's movements. Yes, the group was dwindling, but still a force to be reckoned. Putting away thoughts of recent setbacks, Konan shifted in her seat on the bench. She had reached a small town in grass and was currently enjoying a much-needed rest. Grass was neutral toward Akatsuki, so she had no problem crossing the border and wandering around any place she wanted. Crossing the border into the land of fire, though, would prove to be more difficult, yet possible, challenge. Discretion was a key part of this mission. She would have to slip into the land of fire, somehow infiltrate Konoha without being noticed, and capture the Kyuubi holder before anyone found out. Pain told her to use every possible method to ensure his capture. Preferably, she wanted to trick him into following her out of the village, under the guise that Akatsuki wanted to negotiate with the remainder Jinchuriki. Once she got him far away from the walls of Konoha, she would capture, bound, and drag him back to the base to be extracted. The plan was a long shot, but information gathered suggested that the Kyuubi Jinchuriki was brash and naive. In his report on the subject, Itachi had written in great detail that Konoha's Jinchuriki was impulsive and foolish. Tricking him would not be a problem. Watching a young couple and their daughter walk by brought a smile to her face. This was what Akatsuki was fighting for, true peace. Everyone could live their lives without fear of war or destruction. This was Akatsuki's true goal and she would die to ensure it happens. Yahiko, your dream will be realized. Just wait a little longer. Thinking of the man who was like a brother to her made her sad, but Konan shook it off. Dwelling on his death would not help her. She needed to concentrate on her mission. She reached into her pocket inside her Akatsuki cloak and pulled out a picture of her target, complete with information. Name: Naruto Uzumaki. Current age: 16. Height: 5 feet 8. Weight: between 130 to 140 lbs. Eye color: blue. Hair color: blonde. Affiliation: Konohagakure. Status: alive, current Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. Known techniques: Kage Bunshin, Rasengan, and various wind jutsu. Warnings: target has impossibly high chakra reserves and advanced healing. If capture seems impossible, retreat. Target must be taken alive. Take caution not to anger. Class: easily low A class, but possibly S class when using the Kyuubi's chakra. Conan read over the information carefully. She then studied the photo, taking in every detail. The young blonde had whisker-like tattoo markings on each cheek, obviously a trait gained from his tenant. Conan wouldn't admit it out loud, but the Jinchuriki was actually very handsome. The whisker marks gave him a sort of feral appeal and those blue eyes seemed to sparkle even though it was only a picture. If she met him during a different time, with no mission and no Kyuubi to capture, she probably would invite him to her bed. She was an S-class criminal and a member of a terrorist organization, but she was still a woman with needs. Maybe she should use seduction on this mission. It wouldn't hurt to try and maybe she could scratch an itch that had bothered her for some time. Snap out of it, Conan. You an important mission to complete, she told herself, shaking her head of those thoughts. The idea still appealed to her, though. The thought of seeing those sparkling eyes looking up at her while he ate her out nearly caused the blue-haired Kunoichi to have a nosebleed. Her former sensei, Jiraiya, must have had a greater influence on her than she realized. I could persuade him to come with me quietly and without a fight if I offered. Yes, that would work. It's for the mission, after all. Looking up at the sun and judging that it was around noon, Conan decided to get something to eat before she moved on. Getting up from her spot, Conan wandered toward the middle of town, intent on finding the sushi restaurant that she saw advertised on a billboard. You couldn't complete a mission on an empty stomach, after all. Okay, now lie back on the couch and hold still, that's it. Now, stroke yourself. Stroke myself. Wank, jerk off, masturbate, whatever word you use. Now, I've always wanted to see a man stroke himself, so, stroke. Okay. Can you pass me a pillow? I need something to keep my head up. Anko grabbed a pillow and gently raised his head. She slid the pillow underneath his head and heard Naruto sigh in comfort. Okay. I'm relaxed now. He griped the base of his and began to run his hand up and down its length. Anko sat in the chair next to the couch and eagerly watched him masturbate. She was like him, the two never having put clothes on since they woke up. She noticed Naruto's eyes staring at her form as he masturbated and grinned. Oh. Does my body look that good? Anko asked teasingly. She cupped her large S and started playing with her nipples. Oh, she moaned. Let me know when you're ready to come, Naruto-kun. I want you to spray your load all over my S. Naruto couldn't tear his eyes away from the erotic spectacle. He watched as Anko reached a hand down to her dripping opening and slips a finger inside. She moaned loudly when she inserted a second finger and started pumping them in and out. As that hand played with her, the other one squeezed her S, lightly flicking and twisting her nipples. It was one of the wildest things Naruto had ever seen. A glob of pre-cum blew out of his tip, coating his hand and decreasing the friction, allowing him to jerk off faster. He picked up his speed, wanting nothing more than to cum all over those perfect tits. Anko continued to tease her, all the while staring at the sausage known as Naruto's. The thing was just so big and thick, the sight of it alone drove Anko crazy. The more she studied it, the more Anko wondered how the hell such a large thing could have fit inside of her the other night. She had never seen it even remotely as big as Naruto's. Plus, his loads could be measured in the gallons. She thought her womb would burst from all the cum he shot into her last night. Anko thanked Kami she had the sense to perform the contraceptive jutsu before they had. With the ungodly amount of cum he released inside of her, she would surely have gotten pregnant. Anko wanted children one day, just not while she was so young and still taking missions. But the idea of getting pregnant, if it was Naruto's child, sounded very tempting. Only if it was his child, though. Anko-chan, I'm about to come. His declaration snapped her out of her daydreams, bringing her back to reality. Anko realized she was close to coming too. Okay. Get over here. Naruto complied and got up from his comfortable spot. He stood in front of the sitting kunoichi, beating off his at burning speeds. He aimed it at her bouncing globes and felt his balls stir. Here it comes, Anko-chan. Moments later a large, cup-size blast of cum rocketed out of his and splashed against Anko's S, coating the majority of them in one shot. The feeling of his hot cum on her S was enough to send the purple-haired woman over the edge and into a mind-blowing orgasm. Anko screamed his name as her juices splashed onto Naruto's thighs and his thick spunk continued to guzzle out of his member. Aside from coating her S, Naruto's cum coated her toned stomach and her lower region. The white substance drizzled down past her belly button and onto her inner thighs while simultaneously covering her still gushing opening. Finally, both of their orgasms subsided, leaving two panting lovers gazing into each other's eyes. Kami, you look why right now, Naruto said, noting her flushed and cum-covered appearance. Come here, she grabbed his arms and pulled him down for a soul-searing kiss that left him seeing stars. When they had to pull away from lack of air, the two ninja were left breathing heavily. Naruto lifted her up from her waist, eliciting a squeal from Anko, and slid underneath her, placing her in his lap. They engaged in several more heated sessions of lip-locking before they simply held each other. Anko leaned her head against his chest and listened to his heart beating. Naruto rested his head on top of hers. They stayed that way, silent in their lover's embrace. So, what's next? Anko asked, placing kisses on his chest. It's your turn to pick. Naruto wrapped her arms around her, not caring that her S and stomach were coated in his cum. As he enjoyed the feeling of his trapped between her cheeks, Naruto got an idea. Ever try anal? No, but I'd be willing to try it with you. Just go gentle. Awesome. I've wanted to try it for a while. Get over on the couch on all fours. This is going to be fun. She obeyed and reluctantly disentangled from him. She added a little swing to her hips as she sauntered over to the couch. Anko bent down slowly, teasing him with a view of her bare while she entered his desired position. The sight quickly caused Naruto's semi-erect member to return to full mast and he drooled at the opportunity to something so delicious looking. Anko got on all fours and wiggled her tia singly. Well. Come on, stud. You wanted it, so come stick your throbbing in this tight hole. She spread her cheeks apart, exposing her virgin hole to him. In a blur, Naruto was kneeling behind her on the couch, his hands descending to grope her fleshy rear. Anko moaned from his ministrations and thrust her closer to him. Oh, lick it, Naruto-kun. Lick my dirty hole. Naruto spread her cheeks apart and licked the small hole, causing Anko to shiver. Having his warm breath and wet tongue against her other hole brought an embarrassed blush to Anko's face, yet she couldn't resist pushing her rear further into his face. She felt dirty having him lavish her with so much attention and she liked it. She barely contained a squeal when his tongue pushed through her dirty hole and started twirling inside. Naruto couldn't believe what he was doing. Eating out a woman's was not something he thought he would ever do, but here he was doing it. The moans he was hearing certainly encouraged him to continue and the fact that she was thrusting hair into his face was a good sign. Feeling bold, Naruto slipped a finger inside the dirty hole and ate on the tender flesh of her cheeks. He gave her rear a little slap and marveled at how it rippled deliciously. Kami, I love your. Naruto slipped in another finger and increased the speed of his pumping while continuing to lick each cheek and groping and slapping them with his free hand. He just couldn't get enough. Anko's blush intensified as his worshipping of her continued. She never thought something as simple as a butt could turn someone on so much. Then again, the sight alone of his monstrous was enough to make her wet with arousal, so she figured it was the same for him concerning her rear. She couldn't hold back a squeal when a third finger was inserted. For Cammie's sake, how much was he enjoying himself back there? But she couldn't complain. It did feel really good, having fun back there. Anko asked, inhaling sharply when he blew air on her stretched hole. A lot of fun, he said casually. She felt him on one of her cheeks. How about you? Oh, damn, that felt good, she moaned. I'm doing all right. This might sound crazy, but are you in love with my? I think so, he admitted, slapping her rear once more. Ah, the ripple effect never ceases to amaze me. Not that I don't mind this, but I thought you wanted to. My all you've done is, well, you've done pretty much everything besides at. Cammie, another finger. I'm trying to get you ready for anal. It would hurt you if I just slammed it in without preparation. He spread his fingers, expanding her tight hole. I think it's ready. Now, all I need is some lube. He scooted off the couch and moved his in front of her mouth. Mind helping me with that? Anko grinned. Sure. She grabbed his engorged organ by the base and spit a good amount of saliva on its length. She moved her hand up and down the shaft, making sure to coat every inch of the delicious meat stick with her saliva. Just to be safe, she ran her tongue along his length, starting from the pre-cum leaking tip and ending at the base. Naruto shivered as her tongue slid underneath his shaft and a blob of pre-cum landed on her cheek. Once satisfied his was properly lubed up, Anko pulled away, but not before giving the head a sweet kiss. She gathered up the pre-cum on her cheek with a delicate finger and sensually ate the sample of his spunk. Tastes oddly sweet, she commented, ing her finger clean of the tasty substance. Then, remembering the gallon sprayed on her chest, ran a hand over one of her gathering a good amount of cum. Naruto watched her raise the hand to her face and on each cum-covered finger. His twitched at the sight. Delicious. Next time, make sure to dump your load in my mouth, she said, already gathering more. Naruto nodded, eager to comply with that request. His eyes wandered away from her cum-coated chest and back to her butt, which looked ready for a good ing. Naruto moved back to his glorious position behind the purple-haired goddess divine rear. He placed his engorged tip at her back door entrance and gripped her waist. He grinned in anticipation. Ready, Anko-chan. She nodded excitedly, holding herself up steadily with her arms. I'm ready, just go gentle first. Getting an affirmative response, Naruto slowly pushed his head past the puckered hole. His previous fingering had loosened it considerably, so there wasn't much resistance at first. But as the head disappeared, the tightness increased as he pushed further than his fingers ever went. He was immediately altered with the most heavenly feeling he ever experienced. The tightness was unbelievable, as was the warmth. After getting 4 solid inches in, the walls of her bowels started twitching and gripping his, nearly sending him over the edge, and he didn't even have his whole length inside. He quickly decided that anal was his new favorite hobby. Why on earth had he never tried this before? Even during his clone gangbang with Tsunade, not once did he or his clones venture to her rear. He decided he would make up for lost time as he pushed his hips forward. Anko had never tried anal before, mostly because she was scared. She just couldn't wrap her mind around why someone would want a thrusting in there. She agreed to it because Naruto asked her. When he first pushed his head past her puckered hole, Anko expected to feel some pain or aching, but was met with great surprise when she didn't feel pain, but pleasure. As his inched further and further inside her bowels, stretching her inner walls with his thickness, Anko knew she was addicted. It brought a pleasurable feeling that she couldn't describe. It made her feel so full, so filled. By the time every inch of his was buried inside of her, Anko's was gushing with arousal. Does this arouse you, Anko-chan? Having my stretching your tight hole? Naruto said, feeling her juices dripping onto his thighs. It made him feel good that she was getting as much enjoyment out of the experience as he was. Anko growled. Stop talking and start moving, Gaki. I want you to not just stand there. Start thrusting, she ordered, enjoying the dirty talk. She felt Naruto's grip on her hips tighten. Oh, you won't be able to walk for a week once I'm done with you. He pulled his length back until only the head remained. He could already feel the clinging walls trying to pull him back. Giving hair a good slap, he slammed his back inside. The ripple effect and slapping sound would forever grace Naruto's wet dreams. So would Anko's scream of, "Oh Kami, I'm already going to come." Naruto was relentless. His hips were a blur as his thrust fast and forceful, reaching into the deepest part of her bowels, Yori's gripping my. He gripped her hips tighter and, if possible, increased his speed. Anko couldn't handle the speed. Her arms were already shaking from her orgasm, and now that another one was approaching, her strength was slowly waning. His big balls slapping against her opening didn't help, especially when a particularly long thrust caused them to hit her. That was the edge for Anko. Screaming his name over and over again, Anko came hard and collapsed on the couch, her weak arms finally giving out. This didn't stop Naruto, though. He leaned forward until his chest touched her back, using his arms to keep him raised so that he wouldn't crush her with his weight, then continued his thrusting, now aimed downward and reaching even further depths. His hips smacked against her plump rear, causing the cushion she was under to bounce and the couch to creak. Don't stop. Don't stop. Don't stop. Don't stop. Anko screamed, eyes closed from the pleasure. If you pull out, I'll kill you. Naruto turned her head and captured her lips, never ceasing his pounding. He was close to coming and boy was it going to be a huge one. Open your eyes, he said between kisses. She complied and her brown eyes stared into his blue ones. I want you to look at me while I fill your with cum. You got it. She nodded eagerly and pressed her lips to his, all while holding his gaze. Feeling his impending orgasm, Naruto increased his pace. Loud, wet slapping sounds echoed throughout the living room and the apartment, only serving to further arouse Tatu Ninja. Just as he was about to burst, Naruto pulled all the way out and then buried himself as deep as possible. He erupted, sending blast after blast of his thick cream inside of her bowels. Naruto groaned as he experienced an orgasm that he would fondly remember decades from now as one of the best he ever had. While he successfully painted her insides white, Anko reached even higher decibels, which would have been louder if not for Naruto silencing her with his lips. She could feel the hot spunk fill hair to the brim, stretching her bowels with its thickness. Another orgasm came crashing over her, causing hair to clamp down on his, further coaxing out more of the hot liquid. Still twitching and throbbing inside of her dirty hole, Naruto's strength left him and he collapsed on top of her. He managed to land partly to the side so as not to crush her. Anko twisted with him and they ended up spooning. Both of them were breathing heavily and flushed. Sheen of sweat coated their bodies as they came down from their orgasmic high. Naruto laid kisses on her neck and Anko moved her head to allow him access, enjoying the intimate gesture. His hand traced her curves, stopping to appreciate the flaring of her hips, and then moved to her flat stomach, rubbing its smooth surface. He fingered her belly button briefly before moving on to cup one of her S. Anko moaned and snuggled against him. Those were the best orgasms I've ever had, she whispered to him, the only ones that rival them are last night's. He grinned against her neck and ed on the tender flesh. Glad I impressed. Congratulations, you've turned me into Anman. To emphasize, he squeezed her. Anko giggled at his declaration. I believe you, considering you still have your buried in my O. If you keep moving like that I might have another orgasm. I'm going to pull out. When I do, can you raise your hips up for me? Why? That was probably one of the biggest loads ever. I want to at least see how much. All right. Naruto pulled out slowly, savoring the feeling of her velvety walls. His head came out with a pop and immediately cum started rushing out. The flow increased when Anko raised her hips. Wow, that's a lot of cum, he commented, amazed he could release such an amount. Anko shivered. Is it weird that the feeling of it rushing out turns me on? Nope. That just makes you even wire. Really? Yep. Anko-chan is very why. She smiled at him and lowered her hips. She placed a kiss on his nose. How about I clean up and we move on to my turn? Anko asked, grinning. Deal, but only if I get to help you clean. Sure, to the tub. Race ya. Tsunade wished to all deities that the paperwork would stop coming, but they must not have been feeling too generous. It was 2 in the afternoon. She had been going at it since 7. She needed to get all of this work done if she wanted to meet Naruto tonight and tell him what she had been dying to say. Somehow, her real appearance now resembled not a 52-year-old woman, but a 21-year-old bombshell just entering her prime. She had to place her regular genjutsu just so nobody would get suspicious. How on earth did this happen? She had some theories, but nothing had been confirmed. Tsunade needed to find out if this was more than just a physical change. Could she have really been de aged 30 years? It sounded so impossible, yet she hoped to Kami it was true. All barriers holding her back from pursuing a real relationship with Naruto would be removed. They could actually be a real couple. She knew she hurt him last night. She could see it written all over his face. She would make it up to him if it was the last thing she did. Shizune, she yelled. Her loyalist aunt was there not even 10 seconds later. Yes, Tsunade-sama, she asked, out of breath from running. How much paperwork do I have left? You still have some mission reports to go over and a few documents about the construction of a new park. Oh, and you have a meeting with the clan leaders at 5. Tsunade groaned and resisted the urge to break something. Shizune. Yes, Tsunade-sama. I'll give you a week off with pay if you get me out of that meeting. A week with pay. Not enough. Fine. 2 weeks with pay, plus a bonus. That's. And an all-expenses paid vacation to the spa resort. 2 tickets for you and a friend. And I promise I'll try not to drink on the job anymore. Not trusting her voice, Shizune simply nodded. Good. Now, I have a lot of paperwork to get done. Let me know how it goes. Hi, Tsunade-sama. Shizune walked out and closed the door behind her. She slumped against the door, a smile on her face. 2 weeks off with pay and bonus. Plus paid vacation and no drinking. Kami, you really know how to make a girl happy. She said looking up, giggling. Now who should I take with me? I don't really have any friends besides Tsunade-sama. There's Sakura-chan, but she's busy with her hospital duties. Maybe Naruto-kun would like to go. I know spas are for girls, but maybe if I asked nicely. It would be nice getting a massage while Naruto-kun sits next to me, or maybe giving me the massage. Oh, Shizune, you're a naughty girl. Giggling pervasively, Shizune picked herself up and walked away with a noticeable skip. She had to tell a bunch of clan leaders that the meeting would have to be rescheduled. In the meantime, Shizune would plan for her paid vacation, which included a shirtless Naruto massaging her bare back. Naruto sneezed, breaking his concentration on giving Anko's essay good cleaning. Looks like somebody's talking about you, Naruto-kun, Anko said jokingly. She was currently sitting in Naruto's lap, her back pressed against his chest. They were both in her bathtub, where Naruto was cleaning every inch of her body. Bubbles covered the top of the water and occasionally Naruto would scoop some more to put on her body. Probably. Now, where were we? He grabbed her and fondled the fleshy orbs. I don't think groping constitutes as cleaning, Naruto-kun. I have soap on my hands and we're in a bathtub. It's cleaning, trust me. Damn, I love your Anko sighed in fake exasperation. And your seems to enjoy my crack. Don't tell me you already want a repeat performance. Naruto kissed her neck. But you enjoyed it, he pointed out. Yes, but I'm already walking with a slight limp. Anal is great, but mine needs a rest. Alright, he agreed with a pout, but I want a tit job. Oh, sounds fun, that we'll definitely have to do. And afterwards, you have to eat me out. And then, she grabbed his hand from her and brought it below the water to her. Then you have to stick that big in here, and I'm not going to let you pull out until you come 3 times. Got it? You're the best, Anko-chan. He exclaimed. I know, oh, right there. The hand she placed at her entrance was now inserting several fingers and teasing her. You are so getting laid after this bath. It's good to be Naruto Uzumaki, he thought joyfully.